Trump thought China could attack America with hurricanes. The WHO turns on China, and Hong Kong gets a new chief executive. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. President Trump was the first U.S. president in decades to really understand the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. Top Trump administration officials clearly called out Communist China. They put tariffs on China's unfair trade practices. And Trump worked with allies like India and Japan to counter the rising threat. But perhaps most important, Trump wanted to keep America safe. From China's hurricane gun, at least according to Rolling Stone magazine, a trusted source for foreign policy news. Wow, I didn't know one of the oppressed minorities China was exploiting were mutants. They've captured Storm. We have to rescue her. According to three anonymous sources, supposedly senior officials in the Trump administration, Trump was asking, does China have the secret technology, a weapon even, to create large man-made hurricanes and then launch them at the United States? And more importantly, if so, would this constitute an act of war by a foreign power, and could the U.S. retaliate militarily? In fact, probably with nukes. According to Axios, back in 2019, Trump suggested nuking hurricanes to stop them from hitting the U.S. At least according to Axios' anonymous sources, supposedly senior officials in the Trump administration. Of course, nuking a hurricane that China sends our way is ridiculous. Because if they have Storm, they also have Magneto, who'd send the nukes right back at us. Diabolical. Trump responded to the Axios article by tweeting, oh yeah, Trump's Twitter is gone. Well, at the time he tweeted that the story was ridiculous, he never said that, and it was fake news. And I have to agree. These kinds of narratives pushed by legacy media outlets based on questionable anonymous sources are dubious at best and fake news at worst. After all, everyone knows China doesn't have a hurricane gun. They obviously have a typhoon gun. And coming up after the break, the World Health Organization turns on China. Welcome back. It's hard to overstate how badly the World Health Organization handled the COVID pandemic. They praised China's response to the virus, covering up the fact that China spent weeks covering it up. They delayed labeling it a pandemic even after it met the WHO's own standard for a pandemic. They refused to investigate the origins of the virus. In fact, WHO leadership quietly negotiated terms with China that sidelined its own experts. They would not question China's initial response or even visit the live animal market in the city of Wuhan where the outbreak seemed to have originated. That's like conducting a murder investigation and you believe the guy covered in blood when he tells you to not check out the crawl space with scratch marks all over it. Sure, he seems like a nice enough guy. At the same time, the health organization pushed misleading and contradictory information about the risk of spread from symptomless carriers. Its experts were slow to accept that the virus could be airborne. Top health officials encouraged travel as usual, advice that was based on politics and economics, not science. In particular, the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, was very close to Chinese leadership. Uncomfortably close. So I was kind of surprised this week when he said this.
When we talk about the zero COVID strategy, we don't think that it's sustainable considering the behavior of the virus now and what we anticipate in the future.
Et tu, Brute? That's shocking. The zero COVID policy is backed by Chinese leader Xi Jinping himself. We did a full episode this week about how he's pinning his political legitimacy on zero COVID. Needless to say, the Chinese Communist Party freaked out.
China is fully equipped and capable of achieving dynamic zero. We also have full confidence in winning the hard battle of epidemic prevention and making a greater contribution to the global fight against the epidemic. We hope that those concerned will look at China's pandemic prevention and control policy objectively and rationally and be more aware of the facts rather than making irresponsible comments.
Of course, it's not like the people inside China will ever hear those irresponsible comments, because the WHO chief has been censored on the Chinese internet. But it was irresponsible for Dr. Tedros to say what he did. If China lifts its zero-COVID policy, 1.6 million people will die in a virus tsunami, according to a study by Chinese scientists. They have a tsunami gun too? As we all know, there's no way scientists could be used for politics. No, the best thing is to carry on the zero-COVID policy and test everyone in China, no matter how small. Although I'm sure they don't all mind being shut in. After all, some of those small creatures are hermit crabs. And coming up after the break, a revolution may be brewing within the Communist Party. Welcome back. The Biden administration is considering dropping some Trump-era China tariffs. Biden says it's to help control rising consumer prices, inflation. Hey, you know what might help control inflation? Stop printing money to pay for unrestrained government spending. How about that? Maybe that would do something to stop the record inflation. Seriously, completely ending the tariffs seems like an insane move by the Biden administration. But you know who loves that idea? The Chinese Communist Party. They've already started rolling out the propaganda about why the U.S. canceling tariffs is in everyone's best interests. Americans, though, don't seem to think so. According to a recent poll by global data firm Morning Consult, the majority of Americans believe imposing tariffs on China are an effective way to protect U.S. industries and American workers. But when have politicians ever felt compelled to do something the majority of Americans believe in? It's not like they're our representatives or something. 2/3 of voters support continuing the tariffs, and the support crosses party lines. The poll also found a majority of Americans favor candidates who are tough on China. If Biden thinks ending China tariffs, especially ahead of the midterms, is a winning strategy, well, I've got a hurricane gun to sell him. A revolution may be brewing within the CCP. That's according to the head of ACES, which is basically Australia's CIA. He says disgruntled officials in China and other authoritarian countries are becoming more likely to betray their regimes and leak information.
But what we're seeing is more and more signs of officials, individuals interested in a relationship. That's not coercion. That is very real concern about their culture, the lack of diversity in their culture, and the direction that they're heading in.
So if any high-level communist officials are watching, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us about the hurricane gun. Tesla is having a hard time in China. I mean, even harder than normal. Tesla's factory in Shanghai technically reopened amid lockdowns last month, but they're barely making any cars. Tesla can't build cars because it's having trouble securing parts, and that's because so much of China's supply chain is broken due to the COVID lockdown policies. Tesla's sales in China are down by 98%. And China is Tesla's second biggest market. Tesla's biggest market, of course, are liberals who claim to hate Elon Musk yet make him rich. And the ultimate question is, how will Elon Musk handle this? Especially if he becomes the owner of Twitter, a social media platform China would love to have much more control over. More documents have been leaked about China's relationship with the Solomon Islands. This is a strategic location with major security ramifications for the Pacific. Previously leaked documents revealed a secret security agreement between China and the Solomon Islands Prime Minister that could put a military base on the islands. Now, new documents obtained by the newspaper The Australian reveal plans for new Chinese wharves, shipbuilding, fishing facilities, and clean energy development in the Solomon Islands. Clearly, U.S. attempts to sway the country have yet to bear fruit. Although I'm not sure if I believe it. I'm more willing to bet China actually is developing a hurricane gun than they are clean energy. And over in Hong Kong, Beijing loyalist John Lee has been elected as the new chief executive with 99% of the vote. I know 99% sounds high. Even Putin would be jealous. So what does John Lee have that Putin never did? No one running against him. Yes, John Lee, Hong Kong's former security chief, was the only candidate running. Because to run, you have to be nominated by a pro-Beijing election committee. And on top of that, the only people voting in the election were the roughly 1,400 members of the same pro-Beijing election committee. And Beijing had already picked John Lee before he was even nominated. This article is from the beginning of April. So this wasn't really an election so much as a cosplay event. Now, John Lee was one of the Hong Kong officials the Trump administration sanctioned back in 2020 over the draconian national security law. In fact, those sanctions are why Google deleted John Lee's YouTube channel, proving you don't need YouTube ads to win a rigged election. But Hong Kong officials continue to dazzle, defy expectations. They've now arrested 90-year-old Cardinal Joseph Zen. Cardinal Zen is an outspoken critic of the Chinese Communist Party. He was detained in his role as a trustee of the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, which helped pro-democracy protesters to pay their legal fees. I actually interviewed Cardinal Zen back in 2019, back when I could enter Hong Kong without getting arrested myself. I'll put a link to those interviews below. It's hard to explain how respected Cardinal Zen is in Hong Kong. He's retired, but still spends his days visiting prisoners. Anyway, I hope the Pope is very happy about his deal with the officially atheist Communist Party. Who would have ever thought the Vatican would turn a blind eye to corruption or human rights abuses? In addition to Cardinal Zen, 4 other trustees of the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund were arrested, including friend of the show, pop star Denise Ho, who we also interviewed. One of the trustees was arrested at the airport as he was about to leave Hong Kong. So what are the trustees of this legal aid fund being charged with? Conspiracy to collude with a foreign country or with external elements to endanger national security, for allegedly asking foreign countries to impose sanctions on Hong Kong. Sure, that's why. It's not because they were helping pro-democracy protesters pay for legal fees so they could fight their charges. Speaking of, it now looks like the police are going to go after any Hong Kong lawyers who took money from this legal fund. Who are they going to go after next? Anyone who donated to the fund? This isn't looking good. Speaking of ominous signs, the skies of the Chinese city Zhoushan turned blood red. Don't worry, this isn't the apocalypse or the third impact. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Local reports assure the red color of the sky was generated by the refraction of the red light that was coming from a fishing boat. What? That's even more ridiculous than saying it was a weather balloon. Yeah, I'm going with third impact. YouTube is still playing dirty with us. So the biggest part of our budget to continue making the show and paying our staff comes from the China Uncensored 50-cent army. Fans who contribute as little as $1 per episode on the crowdfunding website Patreon or our exclusive social media platform on Locals. As a thank you to them, I'll answer your questions at the end of an episode. Today's question comes from Growler on Locals. Will Xi Jinping's replacement be anti-West also? Who would the replacement be? Oh, an intriguing question, Growler. So sometime in the next 6 months, Xi will make a bid for a third term as the head of the Chinese Communist Party. But there are plenty of people in the Communist Party that would like to see him fail. Now at this point, it looks like Xi Jinping has the third term in the bag. But there's always the possibility something crazy happens, a black swan event. That could be his zero COVID policy. Zero COVID won't succeed in the long term, but that doesn't mean he won't be able to spin it into a win for himself. But it's all too early to tell, so I'm not sure I can say Xi will even be replaced. And he's never named a successor. But here's what's important. No matter who's in charge, the CCP will always be anti-West. It will always consider freedom and democracy an existential threat. China's war against the West didn't begin with Xi Jinping, not by a long shot. And it would be a mistake to think that if someone replaces Xi, things can change. Thanks for your question and your support, Growler. And if you want to join the China Uncensored 50-cent army and help us fight against communism, head on over to our exclusive social media platform on Locals. That's ChinaUncensored.locals.com. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.